Hi students, I just wanted to create a brief recording to demonstrate how to use the Youth Risk Behaviour Surveillance Survey tool. From now here on out, I'm going to call it the YRBSS because it's less of a mouthful. So for many of you, it may be very easy to navigate. Others, it may help for me to walk you through aspects of it just to kind of train your eyes. I know it was really helpful when somebody sat down with me and just kind of showed me some of the tools. So that's my intention of this brief webinar, so to speak. Let's see, so how to access the YRBSS. So I've provided links throughout the course, and there is a link on the homepage, but if you don't want to have to go back to the homepage, it's really easy to find online. So you can just type in YRBSS and should come straight up. And so I'm just going to click on that link. Okay, so where do we go from here? So the tool that's going to be of most use to you is going to be the Youth Online Data Analysis tool. And so the YRBS, or YRBSS as you'll often see it called, collects a variety of data on basically youth health related behavior. So it gathers data on sexual activity, drug and alcohol use, tobacco use, exposure to violence, and then it also has some questions on suicidality and depression. So as a database, I think if you learn to navigate it, you may be able to mine useful data for a variety of different purposes in your work as a school counsellor. Okay, so looking at this homepage, we can see there's a map of the United States. And basically, if a state is highlighted in lilac, dark lilac, it is has got current YRBSS data. If it's light purple or light lilac, it has previous data, so it didn't collect any data in the 2017. Also worth mentioning is that the YRBSS is collected biannually, so they collected in 2015, they collected in 2017, the next survey will be collected in 2019. And so let's go ahead and click on Florida. Fortunately, it does have current data. Okay, so I'm going to show you several tools for looking at different variables, so to speak, in the YRBSS related to Florida data. Unfortunately, there is no current data for Pinellas, Pasco, or Hillsborough County. There is some, if you go to local, there are some other Florida counties that do have local data. But for you guys, if you are going to be working in in the central Florida area, most of your data is going to be the state level, not local data. And that is a limitation, but at least it's available. So the first thing we're going to do is look at all questions. So let's go, okay, so let's just start by looking at all questions. And you always have to click go, otherwise nothing's going to happen. I have to remind myself to do that. And so you can see there's multiple questions, also multiple items, and it's going to tell you the question, and then it's going to tell you the percentage of students who engaged in this particular activity. So you see there's items related to texted or emails while driving, carried a weapon, in a physical fight. I mean, it goes on and on. Bullying, where have you been electronically bullied? Experienced sexual violence, felt sad and hopeless. As I mentioned, this would be a depression indicator, and then seriously contemplated suicide. So there's a lot of helpful data that really sheds light on some very serious issues. So for the purpose of this course, we're going to be more interested in the items related to tobacco use, scrolling down quickly, alcohol and other drug use. And as was illustrated in the book, and I've tried to shed light on that in the PowerPoint, there's certain behaviours that really signify future risk. So in regard to tobacco, those students who tried cigarette smoking before the age of 13 have a greater risk of not only tobacco use, but also drug and alcohol use. And that is also the same with alcohol. So the question asks, ever drank alcohol? The next one is, had their first drink before the age of 13. And as I mentioned, this is a risk factor for future alcohol misuse. And scrolling down, you can see there's items related to ever used marijuana, current marijuana use, use of heroin. If it's blank, if there's no data, unfortunately, it meant that there wasn't an adequate sample size to provide any meaningful data related to that item. So in that case, as a school counsellor, you may have to pull from other databases or the national rates. Here's another indicator of risk. So offered, sold, or given drugs on school property. We can see that's for males, I believe, in this column. Scrolling back up, apologise. Yes, total. So so 17% of students in total were offered, sold, or given drugs on school property. I feel like for a school counsellor or a school-based leader, that's a pretty high number, and it's probably comparable to the national level. But I mean, as a school leader, I'd want to do something to target that problem. Anyway, not to digress. As you can see, it can be a bit clunky to keep going back and forth through the entire instrument. And so what we can do instead is go back up to the top, and where it says all questions, you can select questions by a particular variable. So we can select the tobacco use questions. And there, once again, it's got each item listed. And as I mentioned, initiation of cigarette smoking is one of those gateway type questions or gateway type factors. And so you could click right on that. Oh, remember to press go. And we've got our data for 2017. You'll notice by default it's gonna populate these columns compare it by female and male. That doesn't really tell us much other than, okay, we can see that 7.8% of the males tried smoking before the age of 13. However, is that significantly different from the female rate? We can see that it's a little bit lower, but is that difference at the statistically significant level? So let's go ahead and compare two. And it really can take a little bit of time to load this database, unfortunately. And yes, males were higher, and coming across here, males more likely at the level of statistical significance to have tried cigarette smoking before females. And if it is statistically significant, you're going to see a circle in one of these boxes to the right. So staying on that one item, let's go ahead and view data set by another subgroup. So let's view it by race. And then we have to press go. And we can compare it by Black and Hispanic, compare to and we can see that it's about the same, and at the level of statistical significance, there was no statistical significant difference. Let's go return to the table and see if there was a difference between Hispanic students and white students. And here we can see there is no difference. So in the context of the social norms lesson that we were focusing on this week, if I were to be creating a social norms campaign around cigarette smoking in the age of initiation, I would, my campaign might likely emphasize the fact that if only 6.8 of the total students have tried cigarette smoking by 13 years of age, my campaign would basically be saying that 94% of students or 93% of students have never tried smoking before the age of 13. And I think that would help dispute the perhaps misbelief that's held among students that everybody's tried smoking. So I think you've probably got the gist of how you can look at different items by selecting a particular question, but we can also compare two locations, and we can also compare the same location across multiple years. So if you were interested in looking at the perhaps differences across time, so do students use more tobacco in 2017 than they did in 2013 or 2015, you could examine those trends. Let's just go ahead and view 2 years for one location. And you could compare different states. Most of the time, you're going to simply want to you're simply going to want to look at how is my state doing in comparison to the nation. I selected compare to same location for 2 years. That's not what I want to do. So view two locations. There we go. So we have Florida 2017 and the United States 2015. We really want to make sure that's going to be the same year, because if we're looking at the 2017 population of Florida with the 2015 population of the United States, it's a different sample. So you want to keep our comparison groups as equivalent as possible, or as close as possible. So scrolling down, we can go ahead and click on compare to. Again, it's taken a little bit of time, and sometimes you'll find that this database is down too. It's helpful, but it is buggy. Also, my internet connection at home is not as strong as it could be. Well, it's taken a little bit longer than usual, so I'm just going to go back to our original home screen. I hope that you've kind of got a sense of how you can compare your state to the nation, and if available, sometimes you can compare your state to the local levels. You can also examine so certain behaviours by different variables such as gender, race, sexual orientation, and things of that nature. Okay, so finally it did pull it up, and so we can see that in regard to ever first tried cigarette smoking before the age of 13, the United States is more likely than Florida. Okay, so if you wanted to get back to the first screen where we had the map of the United States, go back to the top and then just click on Youth Online, that link, and that's going to bring us back to the map. And then why don't we go ahead and select middle school, and you can see automatically that the middle school data is less widely available than the high school data. Fortunately, there is data and current data too available in Florida, but you also will find that because of the lack of representativeness across the sample, that you can't compare the state population to the nation. So it's hard to say how Florida is doing in comparison to the rest of the country. You can compare Florida to these other states, but I doubt very much if you compare Florida to the national sample, because there isn't one. The other thing worth noting about the middle school survey is it's a lot shorter than the high school, and doesn't ask questions about the really high risk behaviors. Well, I hate to say really, but it doesn't ask questions about methamphetamine use, heroin use, sexual activity, and things that we would presuppose that a middle school, or we would hope that a middle school student doesn't engage in. Another factor is the fact that because they're not so much younger, but cognitively they may fatigue when taking a long survey, so it wouldn't be prudent to give them all the items. And as you know, when you're dealing with school districts, it's also very political. So if an administrator casts his or her eyes on a survey that's asking quite tough questions about explicit and dangerous behaviours, they may be quite reticent to give them to their middle school population, even though it does generate good data. So let's see. Well, I think that kind of concludes what I wanted to show you. You really have to just get in there and play with it. Make sure to always click go and always and then compare to if you want to see if there's any statistical significance between different variables or different populations. Okay, that's all I have. If you still have questions or queries, please email me, call me, and I don't mind setting up like a Google Hangouts or a Zoom meeting that I can walk you through this personally. Okay, thank you, bye.